Hello there. Welcome to Imagination Television. I'm Vandana Bharadwaj. As we are now airing in other cities on Diya TV, I want to welcome our viewers in California, Chicago, Georgia, and Texas. Today on Imagination, we have clips from Shabana Azmi's appearance at the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. She was at the NMWA during their 25th anniversary celebrations last year.
Madam Ambassador of India to the United States, Ms. Nirupama Rao, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be here amongst all of you this evening, and I'd like to thank the National Museum of Women in the Arts for giving me the opportunity of being with you today. I'd also like to thank the Indian Embassy and the ICCR for making this possible, and above all, my friend Mahinder Tak, who's also a trustee of the museum. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I think artists, through their work, are working to bring a degree of change. Whether it is a gentle one or a stormy one is really a matter of degree. I have often been asked, what value do artists bring to the world in comparison with, let's say, a scientist or a doctor or an engineer? And on the one hand, I feel that that is really an unfair question because we are sort of comparing apples and oranges. But on the other hand, I do believe that art, all art, whether it's the fine arts, whether it is literature, whether it is film, movies, music, all art has the ability to create a climate of sensitivity in which it is possible for change to occur. Having created that climate of sensitivity, it is possible to plant a seed in which a mindset transformation happens. And we recognize that in the world, as we come with our beliefs and our prejudices, there are lots of areas in which we need a transformational mindset. And I think if art can do that and art wills to do that, it is as equal a contribution. My primary identity is that of being a woman and an artist, and I'm very glad that I am here in a place which recognizes both. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
The question that Shabana ji and I were talking earlier also is, why acting? Why did you, and how did you decide to become an actress, and why?
I think acting decided that I was going to be part of it. Okay. Because what actually happened is, I was just 3 years old and I was in school, and I was taking part in a nursery rhyme you might be familiar with. It was called, "Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon." And I was playing the cow. And there was another 3-year-old who was playing the moon. Now, instead of jumping over the moon, I happened to jump on the moon. The moon got up shrieking. She was 3 years old and she screamed and she slapped me and I slapped her back and the curtains had to be drawn. And that was the beginning when it got written, all right, this is about theater and drama, and that's how it was going to be.
You rewrote the script, actually.
I did, actually. But it really is that I grew up in a family that was in the arts. My mother is an extremely well-known theater actress. She's also worked in some films. And my father was, apart from being an Urdu poet and a writer, he was also the head of the largest theater group in the world called Indian People Theatres Association. And so I grew up really with the smell of grease paint in my nostrils, because on her trips, my mother would take me when I was not in school. And in sort of group scenes, I would be taken up on stage by my mother as part of, you know, how children go along with women. And so I think it was just something that I naturally drew an affinity to. Then when I was in school and in college, it was something that I enjoyed doing very much. And finally, when I had to make a career choice about what I wanted to do, I decided that I was going to join the Film Institute, which is a very reputed institution in India that teaches filmmaking, of which acting is a part. And it was interesting because when I asked my father, I said, you know, I want to take up acting seriously, and will you support me? And he said, I will support you in anything that you do. If you decided tomorrow that you wanted to become a cobbler, I would support you in that, provided you told yourself that you'll try and be the best cobbler in the business. And that's how I started.
Talk about the time period and what did that film do to you and why was it so important? And you won a national award, which is recognized by the government of India.
You know, I think my career has been about being at the right place at the right time. And Ankur came at the right time and heralded the parallel cinema, because of which a whole lot of, and also met with both commercial success as well as critical success. It had a paradigm shift from the films that were being made, which basically catered to the lowest common denominator in an attempt to get everybody in to the theaters, and Ankur was not playing that game. Ankur was saying that we will, you know, address ourselves to a select audience, to an alternative audience, and talk a language which doesn't cater to the lowest common denominator. It opened up many, many venues for me, and there were a lot of very brave filmmakers and writers who used Ankur as a peg to start then making a lot of films which became the parallel cinema. So had I not got the opportunity to act in those films, my talent, if I had any, would remain a closely guarded secret. So I really owe it to the Times, to the filmmakers, and to the scriptwriters for writing films which were different from mainstream cinema.
And you could tell that at the time.
You know, I don't know whether I could tell that so much because I was really young, so there was a lot of things that I was doing instinctively. But the choices that I was making were really aesthetic choices rather than political choices. It was something that I got attracted to, because when I worked in Ankur, people said that it was a disastrous choice to make because I was playing an adulteress and I was playing somebody much older than what I was. And at that time, people didn't take risks. When you decided that you were going to be a heroine in Hindi cinema, you didn't take risks where you played gray characters. The woman in Ankur also steals rice. She sleeps with a man who's not her husband. All these things would fall in the domain of the negative. And yet there was something so human in the story that I just instinctively made that
She was
decision.
trying to survive, basically, right?
When you look at, if you were to look at Hollywood films today and make a comparison, do you find that there are actresses, well, or you could look at Indian cinema also, are there actresses who are deciding to make those difficult choices?
Oh, yes.
Or do you find that most women are taking
No, I think amongst the young contemporary actresses, there is Vidya Balan, who in India, who is doing amazing work, because, you know, she's done like 5 really different roles, taking great risks. And I think the people who take the bar up are people who take risks. It's better to take risks than to always just play safe.
Yeah.
The issues that Susan and I were talking about social activism, how did that trigger off from those films?
You see, what happens is when you get involved in films that talk about social justice, and you are portraying characters who are standing up for social justice, some of the residue of what you are doing during the course of making that film is bound to be left over. It isn't possible to treat your work like a 9-to-6 job and say, all right, I am a woman who's defending women's rights from 9 to 6, and then I come home to my air-conditioned comfort and have nothing to do with the people that I was portraying. Some of it is bound to retain. Now, there are 2 instances which happened, and they happened almost simultaneously, which was in the early 80s. There was a film that I was doing called Par, in which I was playing a woman who, along with her husband, had been thrown out of the village and was coming to the city in search of work. Right. During the making of this film, what I try and do is, in my work, I try and find somebody from real life who is like the character that I'm portraying. So the sweeper woman who was working in the guest house we were living, I struck up a friendship with her. And I would watch the way she would sweep, the way she would eat, the way she would sit. And we sort of formed a kind of friendship. And then a couple of days into the shooting, she said, would you come to my house? And I said, of course I would. And I went. And I just saw poverty of a kind that I had never seen before in my life. It was just a small little tiny room, 225 square feet, with no air, no water, no electricity. It had 8 people who were living in that room. And I was completely shaken that somebody who was living in such adverse circumstances had the generosity to be my friend. And I felt completely taken by that. And I felt that if I went away to Mumbai, having used her to maybe win a national award in the bargain, and did nothing to change the lives of people such as her, it would be a travesty of the trust that she had placed in me as we became friends. And so I just felt a strong affinity and a strong commitment. And it just happened that when I came back feeling so intensely about it, I watched a film called Bombay Our City, which talks about the plight of the migrant who comes to the city in search of work, finds work but no housing, and then has to live in the slums. And that film to me woke me up to the fact that demolitions serve no purpose. They create worse slums out of already existing slums. And so I got involved with the slum dwellers movement.
And you went on hunger strike.
And I went on a hunger strike, which I was so fat at that time was not a bad thing at all. I'll also talk about a film called Arth. I don't know if any of you in the audience have seen a film called Arth. There's lots of people have.
You should try and get them on DVD. I mean, these films are available, really.
Yes. Yeah. So what happened with Arth was I was just an actor who had done a role. And suddenly after the film, 2 things happened. It's a simple story about a woman who's been deserted by her husband for another woman, and then she finds it devastating, but she pulls herself together and comes into her own, and the husband then realizes he's made a mistake and comes back and says, will you forgive me? And she says, if I had done the same thing, would you forgive me? And he's honest enough to say no. So she walks out on him. Now, distributors said, it's a wonderful film, but you can't have this end. An Indian woman saying no to her husband is unacceptable. And they said, you have to change the end. And so anyway, Mahesh Bhatt and I dug our heels in and we said, no, this is why we're making the film and we're not going to change the end. And we did, and the film became a huge success. In fact, became like a cult film.
The songs and everything else.
All of it.
Right.
But suddenly what happened is I had hordes of women walk into my home, not as fans to star, but in sisterhood, expecting me to solve all their marital problems. Now, I was completely taken aback because I was merely an actor who was doing a job. I didn't even realize that this is what their expectations are. And that, in fact, cleared for me the fact that there is a blurring of identity when people actually think that the actor and the character are the same people. And that really started my work with women and the slum dwellers. It's a result, A, of my background, and 2, of the kind of films that I was doing at that point.
Do you find that the activism that you embraced was something that your parents did as well, or was it something that is integral to your career alone?
No, it was what my parents did. My father was a member of the Communist Party, and this is what I had seen all around me. In fact, when I went on the hunger strike, my mother was very worried because I had parked myself in the middle of the city along with other 3 slum dwellers and a filmmaker, Anand Patwardhan, and the government was paying absolutely no heed to us. And by the 5th day, my blood pressure had started dropping, and my mother was really scared, and she sent a message to my father saying that, your daughter is getting sick and she's doing this, and please tell her to, drill some sense in her head. And he said, best of luck, comrade. So it was a part of that.
And did you find as time went on that, was there a price to pay for your social activism? Did you ever feel that there were roles that you didn't receive after that? Was it, obviously you survived the hunger strike, and was something actually, did something come out of that moment?
You see what happened, well, out of that hunger strike we managed to get the alternate land because it was always available. You see, we managed to get that, and I got very actively involved with the movement. But it's an interesting question that you asked because slowly my off-screen persona started becoming sort of so strong that a very dear filmmaker, a friend of mine, Aparna Sen, said that, you know, you're limiting yourself as an actor. My training as an actor, because I was trained under the Stanislavski method, was an actor should be able to prefix the words, if I were. Mother Teresa, a sex worker, a queen, a middle-class woman, anything. And you should be able to portray it to its perfection and its truth. On the other hand, here I was saying that there are certain kinds of roles that I will not do. I will not work in a film that shows woman as a subservient creature. I would do that if there is a transformation from subservience into somebody who wants to rise above it, or the subservience creates such a sense of horror in the audience that they say this is wrong and it mustn't happen. But something that endorses that women are second-class citizens is something that I will not do. So obviously there were films that I was saying no to, which was fine because it was a choice I was making. But what Aparna Sen said is that, you see, you're coming across as somebody with such strong beliefs that if I were to cast you in a film as somebody who's meek, I wouldn't be able to do that because the audience would know she's going to rise up against that. So I'm giving away the story. So it was difficult indeed, and I thought about it. But I think I'm glad I did that.
As an actor, you had just come out of Shyam Benegal's Ankur, and then you did Fakira. What was the difference? I mean, what skills were you using for the two different films as such?
There were two different planets. Just two completely different planets, because in mainstream cinema at that time, there was no script. For many years, I mean, I started in '74, but I'm talking about right up till, I mean, except for Salim Javed, who used to have bound scripts. The norm was that you were just given a storyline, and then the scenes would be written. I remember a scene where Rajesh Khanna and I were working in a film, and we were doing the first page of the scene, not knowing what the second page is going to be, because the writer was sitting in another place somewhere writing the dialogue. So we were getting them like fresh chapatis, not knowing what was happening. Now, in that kind of insane situation, to bring any degree of credibility at all is a huge achievement. I mean, Neetu Singh and I remember for one whole month in a film called Parvarish, we were hanging from a well with crocodiles wanting to eat our feet as the villain and the hero were this thing. Now, what kind of credibility can you possibly bring
Yeah, but
to
some
that?
of those films used to work. You were in Amar Akbar
They
Antony.
always work, yeah.
Do you remember her in Amar Akbar Antony? She was Vinod Khanna's love interest. And there's a beautiful song, you know, but they worked very well.
They did work very well, and in fact, for me, that was the greater challenge. To be able to, my natural affinity was towards obviously scripted things that had defined characters, and that I think is easier to do. But how easy can it be to say 1,000 times, "Maa mujhe samajhne ki koshish kar." How many times can you say it with degree? So I think that what Indian actors have been able to do is really quite amazing. You know, there have been times when I've been working in one film in the morning and another film in the evening, and then when I was when John Schlesinger heard about it, he says, "It's only pure greed, isn't it? What other reason can you be doing things like that?" But there was a time when a cap was put on us where we could not work in more than 12 films at a time. And yet we managed to do things differently. So it worked completely differently. But for me, it was much more challenging because it was something that didn't come naturally to me.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you have not done in film that you feel is essential to either the Bollywood experience or the Indian film experience?
Well, I'm a hopeless dancer. I have 2 left feet, and that is something I anguish about. That I think, you know, it came from many resistance that I had within me. I said, I belong to this intellectual family. I'm from St. Xavier's College. How can I be running around trees? And so there was a kind of inbuilt resistance, which I think today was a mistake, because it's something that you can acquire if you're not so shy about it, because it's an essential and integral part of the Bollywood experience. And today, when I look at today's actors, I marvel at how wonderfully they did it. Yeah. So, I mean, at the tender age of 62, maybe I should try doing that.
You mentioned John Schlesinger, and let's touch upon some of the films that she was in Madame Sozatska with Shirley MacLaine, which was such an amazing performance, and then Roland Joffe came to Calcutta and made City of Joy. You worked with Ismail Merchant. You were in Custody. Talk about those experiences.
You see, I think what happened is very early on, when we started, when Hollywood and Indians started coming together, I think it was a great learning experience for both. Because in Hollywood, the systems are in place. It's all perfect. Mm-hmm. Every department knows what they want. Everybody has a copy of the script. They know exactly what to bring on board. And in India, it's all kind of ad hoc. But on the other hand, what happens is when the system fails, they have no backup at all. Now, because we don't have a system, we are very high on backup. ये नहीं हुआ, जुगाड़ क्यों कहते हैं जुगाड़? जुगाड़ इसको बना के उसकी ऐसे कर दो. So they're strengths that we get from each other. You know, I'll tell you a very interesting thing. While we were doing City of Joy, they had brought these huge rain machines from Los Angeles, in which they put a lot of money, and turned out the rain machines weren't working. It was the last day of shooting. Patrick Swayze had to leave. There was commotion on the sets, and everybody was going mad. There were 2 young little boys. They were about 18 and 21. They were looking over there and said, what's all this fuss? So they said, you know, we need to create rain, and the rain machine is not working. He said, what's the big deal? I'll create rain. They said, how? He said, just give me a couple of hose pipes and I'll do it. And they actually managed to create the rain. You know, they did it. I don't know what they did, but the rain that you see in the movie is not from hose pipes. I mean, it is not from the rain machines. Right. It's from hose pipes. Right. So they just put their act together and somehow do it. Another interesting difference was that we were coming up with a lot of resistance in Calcutta city. That was upset with us because we were working, you know, we were showing the slums, etc. I mean, that's what was perceived, as if people don't know there are slums in India. Anyway, so then there was a lot of resistance, and shooting had come to a halt, and so I said, well, I'll go and speak to the chief minister. And they were amazed, because they said you'd step out of being an actor to actually go and negotiate on part of the producer. I said, well, if it can facilitate, I would do it. They said it's inconceivable that an actor over here would do that, because there are such clear lines that this is the job of production and I don't have anything to do with me. So I think we learn from them and they learn from us, and it's a very happy mix. There is a change in Hindi cinema today, where very different kind of films are being made, independent films reflecting the sensibilities of younger filmmakers who are, you know, Western educated, urban, reflecting their reality, but independent, not catering to the lowest common denominator on the one hand. Then even within mainstream cinema, there is a shift where there's this interesting trying to get real issues. Now, Matru Ki Bijli Ka Mandola is by one of our best filmmakers, really, Vishal Bhardwaj, and it's actually a comedy. It's dark comedy, and I play in it a corrupt politician. And unfortunately, most people say, why do you need the prefix corrupt? Just say politician and the rest. The rest follows, which is a rather sorry state of affairs, I must say. But it's got to do with land grab, and with how farmers are being displaced in the name of progress. And that intersects with my own work, because I do believe, and Madam Ambassador is here, that the central challenge India faces is that we have to invest in infrastructure. That is very important, because today, as we become a global power and recognize the world over, we need to invest in infrastructure that will necessarily lead to the displacement of people in large numbers. Now, unless the principle of social justice is applied to the act of rehabilitation and resettlement, instead of progress, we are going to find unrest. And so the work that I'm doing in Matru Ki Bijli, although it's on a much lighter level, is talking about this main problem, not only in India, but in the world, where what is it that we do with displacement? Whose progress is it, and at whose cost? It cannot be the progress of a few at the cost of many. If I talk about progress, and if I have to shift from the land of my birth in the name of progress, surely I have a right to ask that I should be the first beneficiary of that progress. So I think we have to look at alternative models, and where on the one hand we have all been in the pursuance of big is beautiful. I think the time has come to explore alternative paradigms which look at people as value, and when you do the impact assessment of something that is a big project, then you have to necessarily build into it what it does in terms of destroying the environment and displacing people as the price that you have to pay, and then see whether the progress that you're talking about is actual progress.
Yes, right.